Does being good at photo editing help you as a photographer? Sure, yes it can, but I do not believe it's a requirement for people to have to spend years learning how to edit their photos with complicated software just to be able to call themselves a photographer. Honestly, it's a better use of our time as photographers to find solutions that allow us to spend less time behind the computer and more time out creating with our cameras. To prove this point to you all, I'm going to edit 4 Fujifilm JPEG files using the power of AI in Skylum Luminar Neo, who is the sponsor of today's video. Luminar Neo is my go-to recommendation for beginners, hobbyists, and those who just want to focus more time on shooting and less time on editing. Its simplified user interface is focused just on the tools you need to make impactful edits. There are no complicated graphs, there's minimal tabs, and by default the menus and sliders are collapsed and hidden, compared to other softwares that can overwhelm you with 50 plus sliders all breathing down your neck. So I like to use Luminar Neo as a plugin from within Lightroom. After I select a specific photo that I want, I go into plugin extras and I go to transfer to Luminar Neo. First, just looking at it, I want to brighten it up a little bit, and we're going to use the enhance AI to kind of do this combination of contrast and exposure lifting. Bring this up right here. And we already see it getting difference in terms of the exposure and the contrast of the subject, bringing up the shadows just a little bit. And that's without having to do a lot of different tweaks on different sliders. So now that I've got that kind of done, I'm going to go to structure, and I want to really increase the detail of this, what is this thing called? I don't even know, like a binocular. So I'm going to increase the structure right here. And a good rule of thumb when you're editing these types of photos is try not to go too intense. And if you find something that has kind of a good amount of impact, try to dial it back a little bit. So I'm going to probably bring it right around here. We're going to zoom in just to see what that difference is. So it's bringing up the details inside the texture of this binocular thing. We're going to pull up the masking brush to just paint on the areas that we want it to affect. So I'm just going to basically paint it on this section right here, so it doesn't affect the rest of the photo. We're going to just increase it a little bit more. And then what I want to actually play with here is changing the background of the sky to be a little bit warmer. So I'm going to go to this landscape feature right here and go to golden hour. We're just going to increase this just a little bit, just to warm up the image just a tad. And it's ever so slight, and you know, it's accurate because this photo was taken at golden hour. And then we can go into the super contrast, which is going to change like the different contrast of the different tonal levels of the image. So if we go to highlight contrast, you can see that it's really affecting the sky in the background. This is a little bit too heavy-handed, so we're going to bring it back. And what I like to go for is just a very subtle look to it. It's a little bit too strong, so I'm going to bring it right here. And now I'm going to go back and just increase the exposure just a little bit so that it's not too dark on our end. And then just bring down the shadows for some contrast. And then let's check out what the difference between this photo is before and after. So for this next photo, we have this picture of the, I think it's a Brooklyn Bridge, the skyline, which is taken at Dumbo in the Brooklyn side of New York City. So this one does look a little bit dark. So what I want to do right off the bat is check out what the enhance is going to do for this specific image. So here you can see it's already kind of brightening things up and giving a little bit more dynamic range to the image. That really kind of like brings up what I would want to do, which is increasing the exposure a little bit, adding a little bit to the shadows, giving some highlight dimension here. So again, this is just like one specific slider, this enhance slider. So I think all I really want to do now is go into this super contrast and just dial in the highlights. And maybe check out the mid-tone contrast to see what that does. That's a little bit too heavy-handed, so we're just going to do just a little bit right here. And then what does shadow contrast do? So this is really just bringing it back up, which I don't think I want to do too much of that. Okay, and then we're going to go back to the landscape and we're going to add some golden hour warmth. So this is too much. Probably right here. We're just going to increase the exposure just a little bit and then bring down the highlights again. If you don't like the saturation that much, we can go into the color and just decrease the saturation a little bit if it's too heavy-handed for you. And then you can see here, it's still keeping that kind of like dull tone. I think for this particular image, I want to keep it kind of like cool and moody and see what we can do with the enhance in this case. For the enhance, I don't want it to make it too bright. So let's check it out. And here the enhance is kind of like opening up the shadows within the entire storefront. So let's not do it too much. Maybe like right here. So just opening up the shadows a little bit on the edges. And then what I'm going to do is go to the develop. We're going to increase the exposure just a little bit. Bring down the highlights. Bring down the shadows just to give that contrast back. And then I want to play with the temperature a little bit. So I'm going to go to the color harmony and then see what we can do. So the cool, this is the warm. Kind of go right here. So we're just going to bring back some of these highlights. So here we see that, you know, we're increasing the dynamic range and the tonal values of this specific image. And again, this is a JPEG file from the Fujifilm camera. This isn't a RAW file. So we're able to kind of like increase the dynamics of the image without taking away the color science and the tones from the Fujifilm camera. I think the one thing that I want to note is that I'm not going into a raw file, messing with all the HSL, the tone curve, the split toning, all that stuff. I'm using the Fujifilm JPEG files and just opening up a little bit of the dynamic range within the JPEG file and kind of treating it almost like a film photo. And then just letting Luminar AI like do a lot of the thinking for me in terms of what an enhanced look might look like. And then kind of like adding my final touches. So we're going to go into the enhance for the accent, and we're gonna a little bit too much that way, so we're gonna bring it back down. So already that's looking pretty good, and then I want to bring that up a little bit, and then we can go into the super contrast and just check out the highlights, kind of bringing back some of that detail in the highlights, and looking at the mid-tone contrasts. I want to keep it a little bit soft looking still. And then we'll go into structure. I think for this image, there's a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to go to structure and increase the structure a little bit. So here is like it super structured out, which is a little bit too HDR-y for my liking. So I'm going to bring it back down, and we're just going to go to maybe like 15. And then I'm going to go into, this is what I use for like the warmth to the image. So let's just bring it in a little bit. So now let's look at the before and after. So if you take away anything from this video, let it be this: spend more time out photographing and less time editing. Thanks again to Skylum for sponsoring today's video. If you want to try Luminar Neo, check it out in the link down in the description below. Just, download it, try it for free, and see if it's something that you'd like to implement into your workflow. And with that, my name is Reggie Ballesteros. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you loved it, please consider subscribing for more Fujifilm and photography content. Thanks for watching, y'all.